On our 5th anniversary, Louis abandoned me and went to a bar to fight for his childhood sweetheart. When I arrived, he was throwing a marriage certificate at the other person's head, saying, "You ask who I am? I'm her husband." I approached and picked up the red booklet from the ground. The seal was clear, and the couple in the photo smiled brightly, yet next month was to be our wedding. Later, I attended his wedding to his childhood sweetheart in full dress. Louis, suppressing his reluctance with red eyes, called me sister-in-law laughable, as even a fool knows to choose between a rotten cucumber and a 200 million yuan wealthy marriage. On our 5th anniversary, Louis claimed a business trip, but at midnight, a friend called saying they saw a drunk Louis at a bar. A year ago, Louis drank until his stomach bled to secure a contract. Worried, I rushed to him immediately. Upon arriving at the bar, Louis was in a conflict, heroically shielding a gentle, quiet girl pure as white jasmine behind him. I recognized her as Sophie, Louis's childhood sweetheart before his recognition by the Liu family, with an abusive alcoholic father, a cowardly selfish mother, a parasitic brother, and her helpless fragility. Louis glared menacingly at the greasy bald man before him, saying, "You ask who I am?" He threw a red booklet at the man's bald head, declaring, "Open your dog eyes and see clearly, I'm her husband, dare to touch my woman in Jiang City, and you're dead," prompting the bald man to spit and flee. Louis tightly embraced the trembling girl, saying, "You're my wife now. Promise me you'll leave this place your family, I can support, and I'll pay your debts," each word piercing my heart like a sword. Trembling, I picked up the red booklet from the ground. The seal was clear, the smiles radiant, dated today. On our 5th anniversary, my fiancé registered a marriage with another. Next month was our wedding, revealing his anti-marriage stance as a mere excuse. Catching sight of me, Louis abruptly released the person in his arms, half-sobered by shock, stammering, "Honey, why are you here?" Seeing the crumpled marriage certificate in my hand, he snatched it and hid it, saying, "It's a misunderstanding. Sophie was forced by her family. I did this to help her." Those were just angry words against a thug, his flimsy excuse treating me like a fool. I pursed my trembling lips into a stiff smile as Sophie, like a startled deer, hid behind Louis, her eyes glistening with tears. Sophie said, "Selena, don't overthink it. Louis is kind-hearted and registered with me to help me. We just didn't have time to tell you. Please don't let this ruin your relationship." Louis added, "I've known her for over 20 years, beyond romantic feelings. If there were anything, we'd have been together long ago. No need to be jealous," reducing his infidelity to petty female rivalry in a few words. I approached her, handing over my removed ring, but upon seeing the same ring on her hand, I laughed mockingly, though tears soon uncontrollably followed. I slapped her, saying, "Happy wedding, this is my gift to you both." Louis flared with anger instantly, his breath reeking of alcohol, any guilt from my tears vanishing in a moment. I looked at him and said, "Let's cancel the wedding," then strode away. Louis instinctively chased me, saying, "Don't fuss, once this is settled, I'll divorce her. You know her family situation, I won't truly marry her." A sudden scream came from behind. Sophie fell, her knee landing on a shattered wine glass, the blood-stained shards reflecting an eerie glow. Louis frowned at me, then rushed back, holding her and shoving past me to leave. Watching his panicked figure, I suddenly understood everything. When I was with Louis, his father had just handed him a bankrupt company as a test of his abilities. To turn the company profitable, I gave up my million-yuan salary at Liu Corporation headquarters, becoming his first partner, working relentless overtime for a month to secure our first deal. Later, for the company's growth, we practically lived at the office. Only last year, when it topped the branches in profit, did his father consider him an heir candidate. His current achievements were hard-won, requiring a capable wife, leading him to propose to me. Yet, his days before being recognized by the Liu family were a dark, damp nightmare. He sought to play the hero, saving his struggling childhood sweetheart and his former weak self. He wanted it all. I called the wedding planner to cancel the 6-month prepared wedding. The next second, that scumbag called me. "Selena, calm down, we put so much effort into this wedding. How can you just cancel it?" he said. We've been together 5 years with so many memories. Just because I helped Sophie by registering with her, you'd deny everything about me? After years of sharing joys and hardships, how could I let go? Not that he couldn't abandon our past, he needed a cover. Lewis once said, Sophie's family treats her like a blood bank, what sane man would marry her? He also said she endured men groping her in bars for money, revealing his deep disdain for her and his former self. Had he openly protected his childhood sweetheart, I'd have blessed them, but he shouldn't have dragged me into it or sacrificed my happiness. I said coldly, I don't want something rotten to the core, and hung up as Lewis kept making excuses. As autumn deepened, the night wind grew cold. I returned to the home I'd lived in for 5 years, packing everything, leaving the study tablet on. A notification popped up with Sophie's profile picture. I clicked instinctively and froze. A new post showed clasped hands wearing my same wedding ring, captioned, "Thank you for being there every time I'm hurt." Scrolling through past posts, I realized that for the past year, every gift Lewis gave me, he also gave to Sophie. The vintage necklace for my birthday, the anniversary couple's portrait, the engagement dolls Sophie posted identical ones, all liked by Lewis. Suddenly, I noticed the post IP addresses matched Lewis's business trip locations. Each trip was their sweet getaway. Yet my planned honeymoon was outright rejected by Lewis. In that moment, I felt as if I'd swallowed a fly. Every moment I loved him wholeheartedly, his heart held another woman, my stomach churned, unable to expel anything, my heart aching as if tortured. Unwilling to stay in that home, I called a moving company overnight. As the last luggage was loaded, Lewis returned. Seeing the moving truck, his face darkened like coal. He strode forward, grabbing my wrist, his touch now nauseating. I shook him off instantly. Lewis refused to let go, gritting his teeth. "Selena, what's this fuss? Why can't you show compassion? It's just a certificate, it won't affect your status as Mrs. Liu, you don't need to care so much. This is your home of 5 years, can you just leave?" I slapped Lewis. As husband and wife, they should share the slap. I couldn't favor one. His face darkened, fists clenched. Meeting his rage-filled eyes, I struck his heart. "You know, without that certificate, my child would be illegitimate. You, who knows the disdain of illegitimacy best, why force that on my future child?" Over the years, he couldn't bear his identity being exposed. As the Liu family's illegitimate son, he endured endless scorn before recognition. His eyes' anger nearly solidified. "Don't push me, my patience has limits. Stop pestering me," though I merely stated future facts, shattering his defenses. His gaze flickered, then he smiled. "There was nothing between Sophie and me, but if you keep this up, I wouldn't mind marrying her for real. If you stop now, next month's wedding will proceed. I'll still make you the glamorous Mrs. Liu, vice president of the branch, and later the most honored lady of the Liu group. Otherwise, no regrets allowed." He was threatening me, forgetting who built his success. I smiled and said slowly, "Fine," his eyes reddening. "You." His phone rang suddenly. Seeing the caller, he answered instantly. A sweet voice said, "Lewis, a power outage at home, can you come?" My dad locked me in dark rooms as a kid. "I'm scared," his tense affection easing. "I'm here, coming now." The autumn wind blew, scattering leaves. I suddenly saw my 5 years' effort as a joke, my last attachment vanishing. I moved back to my own home. His affairs no longer concerned me. Near dawn, the opposite door opened suddenly. A man in black silk pajamas emerged, sleepy-eyed. Seeing me, his drowsiness vanished, eyes sparkling like stars, ignoring my protests to carry all my luggage inside. As I prepared to thank him, he blushed and returned to his room, closing the door, tidying up. It was already dawn. The phone rang suddenly, an anonymous number. Answering, I heard familiar intimate gasps, Lewis calling Sophie's name repeatedly, her muffled moans replying. About to hang up, Sophie spoke. I recorded instantly. "What if Selena finds out? The company still needs her." Lewis's voice, low and hoarse with ruthlessness, said, "Should I watch your dad sell you? You're finally back with me, you're mine alone. Selena loves me, she won't leave, she'll marry me outwardly." Once I control the Lou group, I'll dump her, only you'll be Mrs. Lou. The call cut off abruptly, my ears buzzed, strength drained instantly. I stumbled to the toilet, dry heaving uncontrollably, nearly expelling my insides. Social drinking harmed my stomach too, not just his. I naively thought there was at least love between us. Instead, it was all an act. He manipulated my emotions to slave for his company. I suddenly felt fortunate to have uncovered this before falling completely into the abyss. Waking groggily, an unread message appeared. Lou Group headquarters offered me another chance. This time, I didn't refuse, negotiating a deal there. Leaving, a delivery man rushed by, bumping me. I misstepped, my ankle swelling. A tall man ran over, ears red, lifting me, the man from across the hall. Silently, he put me in his car and drove to the hospital. After orthopedics confirmed no fracture, he took me to gastroenterology. Looking at his tomato-red face, I asked, "How did you know about my stomach issues?" His lips trembled. "Louis told me." I stared into his eyes. After a moment, he confessed, he was Christopher, Louis's older brother back from abroad. The Lou family was complex. Louis's mother, a mistress who rose after the original wife's death, brought him into the family. Christopher, the original Mrs. Lou's son, managed overseas business, returning a year ago. I watched his every expression. "You've been scheming to approach me," I said. Embarrassment flashed in his eyes, but he didn't deny it. I smiled, extending a hand. "If you're against Louis, let's wish ourselves a successful partnership." His eyes lit up, shaking my hand solemnly, his voice clear as a spring. "All right." He drove me home, providing all my meals during recovery as a partner, saying nothing of revenge plans, only to act freely he'd handle fallout. A week later, my ankle nearly healed. I went to resign. Arriving, I saw Sophie. The secretary gave her a badge matching my position. Louis was a master balancer. She smirked, eyes triumphant. "Selena, sorry, Louis thought my old job too tough, insisted I join his company. He's great, just overly caring, don't mind it." Speaking, she neared with coffee, adjusting her collar to reveal suggestive marks. Ignoring her, I headed to HR to resign. But she tilted the coffee toward me. The steaming liquid splashed her chest, reddening her fair skin. Teary-eyed, she said, "Selena, I kindly offered coffee. Why did you spill it on me?" Louis shouted, running over, shoving me down. He wiped her chest tenderly, glaring at me fiercely. "Selena, I thought you returned regretting it, but you're still deluded. Winning me back isn't easy. Kneel and apologize to Sophie, or I won't marry you and I'll fire you." Staring at him, he felt alien, unmasked. No trace of his former self remained, though I saw through him. My heart ached densely, torn by ants, love turning to hate, raging within. I pulled out my badge, opened it, took the wedding dress Louis designed for me when I had nothing, tore it to pieces, threw them at his face, smiling. "Who cares?" Veins bulged on Louis's forehead, eyes bloodshot, roaring, "Selena, no regrets without me. What can an orphan achieve? You'll never be my wife, you don't deserve it." His shouts fading, no longer stirring me. Louis announced the bride change. My phone nearly exploded with calls. I shut it off, posted a breakup on Facebook, and activated Do Not Disturb. The doorbell rang. Christopher brought dinner, sneaking glances, likely aware of Louis's wedding news. Silent a moment, he produced papers from behind, voice clear. "My asset proof, no debts," then knelt. "A stable marriage aids my inheritance claim. You're the best fit now." He offered a prenup. "I know marriage is big. I'll pay you 100 million up front if I seize power. You'll get 100 million in Lou shares, totaling 200 million upon divorce." Mouth agape, I froze. His gaze was earnest. "You don't know me yet, but I'll earn your trust with actions." Even with the marriage certificate in hand, I remained dazed, feet floating as if on cotton. The bank alert grounded me. I checked the balance repeatedly. My earnings over years paled beside those zeros. I glanced at the upright man in the car. What did he want? He must truly hate Louis, spending 200 million to hire me against him. Christopher noticed, coughing lightly. I looked away, then back, seeing a blush spread from his ears to his cheeks. My benefactor was upset. I sat straight like him. Join me at the wedding? Sure, he invited me to. Let's watch the show. Louis's wedding was flower-laden, my traces erased in a month. In a gown, I entered, meeting the welcoming pair. Louis smirked. Selena, no regrets today, see how grand Mrs. Lou is. Sophie clung to Louis, eyes curved in smiles. Whispers around mocked me. An orphan once envied for snagging the Lou son, now they're laughingstock. About to retort, a shawl draped over me. Christopher smiled, arm around me, exuding unseen authority at Louis. Nonsense. Call her sister-in-law, eliciting gasps around. Louis's pupils shook, stunned as if struck by lightning, brows furrowed, face ashen. Fearing Christopher inwardly, he suppressed rage, gritting out sister-in-law. His frustration delighted me. Christopher's authority shone. This is the woman you defied Dad for? So unpresentable, needing lessons to greet? Publicly mocked, Louis's face darkened more. Sophie quickly turned obsequious, calling sweetly, "Big brother, sister-in-law." Christopher ignored her, glancing faintly, leading me to the main table. Louis's angry father absent, only his stepmother there. The wedding proceeded, flowered children delivered rings amid cheers, the MC piquing the mood. For life, never parting. Mr. Louis, do you take Miss Sophie as your wife? Glancing at me, Louis gazed tenderly at Sophie. I do. Rings exchanged, lights dimmed, they kissed passionately amid applause, then the screen lit up. Next second, a video showed a 4-year-old hugging Sophie's leg, calling her mom. Their years of photos, plus one with another man, flashed on the screen. Sophie paled, denying instinctively, but mounting photos left her defenseless. She grabbed Louis's hand, shaking her head frantically. Louis, listen, I have a child, but I didn't register with him. We're apart. I love you, she pleaded. Louis, red-faced, veins bulging, flung her away. The screen shifted, a judgment and prison certificate appeared, a huge fine in red, then remittance proof. Sender Sophie, recipient the jailed man's mother. After Louis's return to the Lou family, Sophie's gambling debt-ridden father nearly sold her. That man saved her. Young Sophie saw him as her hero, giving herself to him. But his smuggling and tax evasion, plus her underage status, prevented registration. Later, to shield her, it stayed on hold. A year ago, he was arrested. Massive smuggling led to property seizure and a huge fine. Desperate, Sophie recalled the wealthy Louis. She sent her son and mother-in-law to distant high province, then fabricated a tale of being sold by her father to rejoin Louis. Uncaring of Louis's career, she sought money. His funds couldn't fill her man's debt, only ousting me to become Mrs. Lou and enter the company. Allowed secret asset transfers. Unraveling this took effort, thanks to Christopher's resources. Realizing it all, Louis nearly collapsed, pointing at weeping Sophie. Speechless betrayal stung him too. Guests devoured the scandal, snapping photos, invited media, with cameras ready, raced to capture this first-hand elite disgrace. Louis's mother shrieked, rushing the stage to grapple Sophie. Christopher waved, hidden guards swiftly controlled the scene. Media were ushered out, not asked to delete footage. Christopher led me away. Louis stumbled after me, unwilling. Sophie clung to him, was pushed, her stomach hitting a table corner. Blood flowed down her thighs, piercing Louis's gaze. He slapped himself, then rushed her to the hospital. The elite scandal drew endless curiosity. Soon, the Lou son's disgrace swept the city. Filial Christopher took unedited data and news to Louis's father's office. Old and enraged, Louis's father suffered a stroke, collapsing. Christopher sent him to the hospital with round-the-clock care, barring Louis and his mother to avoid distress. Louis's scandal crashed Lou Group stocks. Leaderless, shareholders backed Christopher. He took over as interim president, decisively stabilizing the shares. After overtime, I returned home, meeting Louis downstairs. He approached, eyes weary, smiling bitterly. Selena, I misjudged people, deceived. Now I taste betrayal. We loved truly for 5 years, now I have only you. Can you forgive me for our past? I smiled. Shareholders pressuring you? His face froze, caught, then argued, no, I genuinely want you back. I scoffed, back to you? To burn myself out for your future again? I spat. Do you deserve it? Wanting no more ties, I turned. He grabbed me. Selena, one more chance, I won't disappoint you. Christopher's car screeched to a halt. He slammed the door, strode over, punching Lewis's nose pained. Lewis's resentment overrode reason, charging him. You stole my wife. He yelled. Both Dad's kids. Why did you live in luxury while I struggled in the gutter? Why were you born in the air while I fought to reach the edge? Effortlessly pinning Lewis, Christopher said coldly, because your mom was the mistress, and your dad saw only profit, not humanity, in his youth. Arms crossed, I watched their unequal fight. Lewis took a one-sided beating, soon bruised and swollen. Gazing at his defeated foe, Christopher warned sternly, don't let me see you here again, or I'll beat you every time. After Lewis left, Christopher led me upstairs. Parting, he said, Lewis is pushing for divorce, and I hummed casually. Seeing him still watching, I chuckled, I don't take back trash or stoop to schemes. Deal with him freely, I won't pity him, he's unworthy. His eyes shimmered, smiling, good. Suddenly, Christopher winced. I noticed his earlobe bleeding, drops staining his white shirt like petals. I led him inside to sit, took out the first aid kit, and gently wiped with a swab. His ears reddened as if bleeding more. Does it hurt? He nearly shook his head but stopped, recalling something. After a pause, he grunted, yes. Sophie miscarried, refusing to let Lewis go, clinging desperately. Media hounding worsened his chaos, leading to fatal errors. Half the deals I secured before resigning were lost. Unburdened, Christopher bought Lewis's company shares from me at double market price. Ignoring pleas from Lewis's father's trusted elders, he ousted Lewis from the company. Jobless, Lewis ignored Christopher's warnings, appearing around me often. Fearing extreme acts, Christopher assigned me bodyguards, picking me up and dropping me off daily when possible. After work one day, Christopher's secretary brought documents. Sighing, he directed the driver to the hospital, leading me to a VIP ward where Lewis's once mighty father lay weak, mouth twisted. Christopher laid the documents before him, flipping page by page, reading softly. Appraisal concludes Lujanon is not Lewis's biological father. Lewis's father turned blue with rage, mumbling incoherently. He produced an old phone. You're old, soft-hearted, you should have destroyed this, or I wouldn't have found it again. Smiling dangerously, hate filled his eyes. You knew Huang Qi drove my mom to death but hid her crime, unable to control me, so you reclaimed a stray son as your power puppet. Pity, he's not your seed, all your efforts, futile. Lewis's father grimaced, roaring hoarsely. Christopher, stern, overlooked the struggling man. You're old, rest. Lewis's father struggled to lift an arm, dropping it heavily. The half-century Lu president accepted his end helplessly. Lewis and his mother lost their final support. Outside, Christopher sat in the car, eyes red, fingers trembling. I held his cold hand. You've worked hard, and he suddenly embraced me. His shoulders shook, growling in pain. I stroked his broad back, silently reciprocating his embrace. Lewis's mother was evicted from the Lu estate, moving into Lewis's house. Sophie, unpaid, refused divorce, staying there. The mutually resentful in-laws quarreled daily. One day, it erupted. Lewis's mother, enraged, pushed Sophie downstairs. Sophie's corpus luteum ruptured, ending her fertility. She clung to Lewis harder. Only his penniless exit would prompt her divorce. I ignored their news, focusing on work. Christopher spun off the branch, handing it to me fully. Never again would I toil for others' gain. Returning from Hangzhou, rain poured suddenly. Christopher personally picked me up at the airport. Lewis rushed from a corner, reeking of alcohol, hair messy, kneeling. He offered a grimy ring, repeating his proposal. Selena, since we met, you've filled my eyes and heart. Marry me? Christopher frowned, fist clenched to strike. I held him back, shaking my head. I can handle it. Looking at Lewis, his vigor gone in days, eyes dark-ringed, he rambled, if you agree to marry me, I'll divorce that wretch instantly, even penniless, no regrets. Selena, I'd divorce for you. Pity me, divorce too? Come back, help me rise again. You said forever together, why doesn't it count? Rain mixed with his tears, unmoved, I said slowly, you never loved me, just my career aid, now you feign pity, hoping I'll soften again? Shaking his head, tears flowed, I smiled, playing that night's recording. His words drained his face white. I sneered, would I be dumb enough to let you dump me again? Besides, a rotten cucumber versus 200 million, any fool knows the choice. Despair filled Lewis's eyes, light gone, a car sped from afar, growing in my pupils suddenly, two forces pushed me aside. The car struck Lewis, sending him falling like a leaf, crashing hard, cries, screams, and brakes filled my ears. Christopher's embrace snapped me from shock. Sophie was dragged from the car by security, mad. As police took her, she roared at me, you ruined me. If not for you, I'd have enough money to leave, you brought me to this. Gravely injured, Lewis was rushed to an ambulance. Before boarding, his gaze fixed on me, he forced a smile, speaking to the nurse. The nurse approached, pointing at Christopher, he has a left forearm fracture, not life-threatening, the other's critical, may not reach the hospital. Want you with him? I refused, sorry, this is my loved one, I must stay with him. The nurse nodded, shut the door, and the ambulance sped off. I joined Christopher in another ambulance. Midway, the other called Lewis, unsavable, lost vital signs, though detached, my heart jolted at the news. Christopher touched my hand, not your fault, don't blame yourself, Sophie killed him. After a while, I nodded slowly. Christopher's arm fractured, saving me, hindering life. With our legal, though contractual, marriage, I moved into his home to care for him closely. After a month, his arm healed well. I lounged watching TV. Christopher returned, showered, then realized halfway he forgot pajamas. Hoarsely, he called me, unfamiliar with his room. I rummaged, found the right cabinet. Leaving, my clothes snagged a box, spilling it open on the floor. A yellowed photo lay amid it, young Christopher and me, he was that blushing high school senior. The door pushed open behind, Christopher, towel-clad, rushed in, embarrassed seeing the photo in my hand. Pressed with pajamas, he admitted falling for me at first sight in high school, but as he planned to confess, Lewis's mother secretly killed his mom. He refused to believe she'd abandon him, demanding truth. Enraged, Lewis's father sent him abroad. Returning, he found my address, only to see me with Lewis. Heartbroken, he bought the house opposite mine. My moving noise woke him. He saw his chance, vowing not to miss me again, crafting the marriage contract pretext. Solemn, he awaited judgment. If you want divorce, I won't stop you. I just regret not stealing you back right away. Seeing the decisive Christopher now fidgety, rubbing nails behind his back, I laughed, not too late to steal me now. Stunned, blush crept from his ears again. This time I couldn't watch closely. He covered my eyes, kissing me like a tempest.